Today we'll hear we, excuse me. Today we'll hear a talk on steps 4 and 5, fear and sex. And please give a warm welcome to Rob C. from Warsaw, Indiana. Thank you.
Good morning, all. I'm Rob. I'm an alcoholic. It's good to see you. I do have a tie-in, I guess, wherever you're based in. I did do my graduate school training down in Charleston, South Carolina. So I have spent some time down south at one time. Of course, that was like 30 whatever years ago, so it kind of doesn't count anymore. Um, uh, my name is Rob. I'm an alcoholic. It's good to see you all. I'm just going to give you a basic down low. I got sober the first time in 1984. I got sobered in August 1984. I was sober for a number of years. This is related. So my first AA experience, one of the things, first time I went to an AA meeting was a speaker meeting, and the guy was up there talking, and uh, he was talking about his drinking career, and he was in Indiana at the time. You couldn't buy alcohol on Sunday, and he said in his meeting, he said he was found himself drinking mouthwash. And in the meeting, he said, "Why were you drinking mouthwash?" And the answer was, "Because it was Sunday." And that made sense to me. And since I knew that made sense to me, I knew I probably belonged here. Why we drank is because it was Sunday. So anyhow, I happened to marry. I got married. I fell in love and got married to a woman whose dad was like the god of AA in the area we lived in. So I went in and at the time he was working his wife was working the steps, and she worked through a 4 step and had her 4 step written down on paper. And she left the 4 step, and unfortunately, her husband read her 4 step. So, and found some information that he didn't know that was particularly harmful. And so it caused a big uproar in their family. And they stayed married, but it was rough for everyone went to treatment after that. Everyone got hospitalized because there was all sorts of uproar. But the lesson I learned in all that, don't do a 4 step. That was the lesson I learned. Don't do a 4 step. That was the lesson I learned. So anyhow, I go to meetings. I'm sober. I go to graduate school in Charleston. I come home. I've been sober a long time. I've been sober 17 years without doing a 4 step. So I was sober 17 years, 8 months and 4 days. I'm in Rome, Italy. And because I hadn't been going to meetings and hadn't been uh, doing the steps, uh, I'm in Rome, Italy. I'm at a bar. And because I'm convinced I'm only alcoholic in the United States. If you stop going to meetings, you start hearing messages that aren't necessarily make any sense. And that was the message I heard: is I'm only drunk in the United States. And many drunks will go, "Yeah, that makes perfect sense." So I'm in Rome, Italy. There's a Guinness in front of me, and I could not. I Nothing bad happened. I got drunk. I didn't cause an international experience. I didn't pee on the Vatican. It turned out okay. So I thought maybe I took this sobriety stuff a little too seriously. So I come back, and in 2 years I'm back in treatment in the hospital, and and this is what happened to my thinking, is that my hands were shaking in the morning, and I was convinced my hand shakiness was because of the coffee I was drinking, not the vodka that I was drinking the night before. I thought that if the coffee was less strong, my hands wouldn't shake so bad. So I worked myself out of whatever. So anyhow, so after being sober for 17 years, I got beat up. I'm beat up. And I finally come back to a meeting of AA, and I go to a meeting at AA, and everyone's so nice. You know how you guys are. You're so nice. And I said, I was sober for this many years, and I got drunk, and everyone was so nice. Everyone said, "Oh, it's cunning, baffling, powerful. What a powerful disease." Everyone in the room except this one guy in the corner. And this one guy in the corner looks at me and says, "Did you fellowship with another alcoholic?" No. Did you pray to God? No. Did you go to a meeting? No. And he says, "Well, I don't feel a bit goddamn sorry for you." Well, that was a little harsh. I preferred the other guy I preferred everyone else who was gentle and kind. And then that guy looked at me and he said, I want you to call me tonight so we can get started. So I picked up that phone that weighs 600 or 700 pounds. Because when we come here, if we're sick enough, if we're broken enough, if we have so much surrender, we will do things that we would never think we would do before. So anyhow, he was my temporary sponsor. We worked the first few steps. And then for whatever reason, because I got a girlfriend, this is really because I got a girlfriend after being sober for 2 months. I got a girlfriend and I thought I didn't need to work these damn steps. So anyhow, we fired each other and I got another sponsor. And this other sponsor was even worse. I hate that. So we start working the steps. He starts talking to me. And before we start talking about step 4, I'm going to talk about what that man did to me. We were in his house and we're sitting around and he said, you want to do this? And I said, yeah, I want to do this. Yes, I want to do this. And he said, get on your knees with me. And we got on our knees and we held hands and we said the 3rd step prayer together. Now, I'm not sure what sort of, it's a very intimate thing to pray with someone else. It's a very opening thing. And once you make that decision, once you make the decision that you're going to do this, is when you can do this. So we're working the 4th step and we're working this. And so we start reading the book and start reading the 12 steps and 12 traditions. And my favorite quote, and it's from page 53 of the 12 and 12. And my favorite quote is this, is that the primary fact that we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. And I find that to be, as for me, as true a statement as I can. And so I have this inability to form a true partnership with someone else. Um, of course, I'm going to be fearful. And of course, I'm going to have problems with intimacy and closeness and sexuality. And of course, I'm going to have some skewed view of everything else. I'm going to have, you know, I started drinking when I was young. I was probably, I don't know, the first time I got drunk, I was 6. I grabbed mom's gin. She had a vodka or she had a martini, and I drank a martini when I was 6 off the countertop. I slept for 24 hours, but I got drunk. I mean, I was 6. How could I not? I drank the whole thing. It didn't taste very good, but boy, was I sleepy. That kind of doesn't matter. What happens is that when we start drinking and using, I think we kind of go back to we don't really start maturing or growing up. And I really think the 12 steps and the 12 traditions are just the 12 steps are just a way for us to become a grown up again. This is all grown up. It's about ownership and becoming a grown up. I think one of my other favorite quotes is from the 12 and 12, and it's in the foreword, and I really love it. And it says 12 the 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. And that is the reason we do this, for me, is to stay sober, but to be useful, to be usefully whole. So when someone asked me to talk about, so you guys asked me to talk about sex and fear. Well, thank you. I get to introduce myself and then start talking about sex and fear. Well, holy shit. So my first response was I was fearful as heck. So I'll be honest, I was fearful about doing this. I can try to listen to Joe and Charlie stuff and try to come up with some sort of genius things that I could come up with. I just talk from the heart and talk about my experience with the 12 and 12 and my experience with work in step 4. And then one of the key things in both of these inventories, these are both a fear inventory and a sex inventory. These are written as inventories. That's what these are written down as. And in each one of them, it says, we put pen to paper. There is an action that we do with this. This is listing of our fears. This is listing all of them and what are they associated with. And we work them like we do our resentments. We work through all these resentments. And as we go through it, what happened with me when I'm working the fear inventory, um, I'm always afraid. I'm afraid of, mostly I'm afraid of, honestly, uh, being found out. Being found out that what you see is what you get. I'm used to being found out, period. That is, being found out of not being authentic, not being real, not being any of things. And then because of not being fear to find out, being unloved and unlovable. Those are, basic as I can be when we talk about fears. And so, the other ones, but those are the bottom ones, bottom line ones. And because of my inability to form a true partnership with another human being, those things become very large and unable to become very large, and block me from you, block me from having these relationships with you. And so what's really nice is now I have a roadmap of how to present this. I have a map of how to do this, of how to walk through these steps. And it was really nice. This is so important to have a sponsor to walk through this with you, to have it, to try to do this by myself. One, I would never do it. And two, I'm not disciplined enough to follow through with what it says, because honestly, I used to think it was hard. No, this is really a how-to particularly in the big book. You take a piece of paper and you make 4 lines, make columns, and you write down your resentment, and you write down the resentment who's to and why it happened, what was your part, and what was the character defect related to it. That's it. You just walk down. Now, if you have a lot of resentments, which I did, what comes down to is that the basic fear is, fear of loss of self-esteem, financial thing. Those fears are all of us have them. And when we work through these and work through these in these inventory, what's nice is it's systematic and we can walk through. So you walk through your resentments, and then you can walk through your fears doing the same thing. And then when you walk through the sex inventory, it's the same thing. And it's really nice in the big book. It also has these very specific questions on them. And it says, when was I self-centered? When was I self-centered? When was I self-seeking? When was I unduly causing jealousy? When was I manipulative? All those sort of things are written down. So we are afraid of something that's not necessary in working these 12 and this four step, where it doesn't say we have to dig deep. It just says dig a little bit. Just look at them a little bit. And remember, when we talk about the promises, or the 9-step promises, when we talk about those, it says if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. With this painstaking part is this part here, the 4th step and the 5th step. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed for we're halfway through. So this little bit of discomfort, this little bit of unease with looking at ourselves, which is really weird. The drunks are unable, this drunk, it was hard to look at myself. Like, what was I afraid to see? And and once you get in the light days, one thing you go, God, that was bad. That was bad. But you know what else? When you work with other, when you work with other drunks, you find out, oh, they're just like me. That's the best thing about when you do the 4th and then the 5th step is you find out, oh, the reason we acted that way is because that's how I'd act. The reason they acted that way is because that's how I would act. And so it becomes so freeing and so opening and so helpful in this growth, in this change, in this way we are becoming different. I was checking my time. I'm sorry. I don't know how long I'm going. I'm just babbling and jabbering and going on. So, uh, so we put these things down in paper. We write these down. We write down our fears. Write down our sexual things. I used to think that uh, because I was so young, because I had stopped growing up at such a young time, um, I thought talk about these sexual things were going to be embarrassing and difficult. It turns out it's not so much. What's really interesting is I'm in my seventh. I'm in my late 60s. So when you're in your late 60s, the urgencies that you had in your early 30s or 20s change. These those urges and that urgency is becomes quieter. The imperious urge becomes quieter, and that's really a helpful thing. Is how to do that when it's quieter, and um, it's it's really kind of pleasant to have some of that quieting of the urges as we age. As I age, I can only speak for myself. What happens when you do these things? What happens when you do your fear inventory, your sex inventory, your resentment inventory? For me, when I went through all these, and then shared it with another human being. One of the things I always thought, I've heard some people say when they did step 5, they felt free and felt part of the human race. And I found that to be completely nonsense. I didn't have that at all, because I had in my own mind, I had this image of myself as this Zen Jesus sort of human being that was kind of alm and all kind all the time. And then it get rid of all that illusion. It got rid of all that illusion. The mask was gone. That facade that I had put on even for myself had disappeared. And since it's disappeared, you see you in the true light of day and you say, well, I didn't see all those warts. I wish they weren't there, but they are. That's it. And you know what? I used to be so afraid, and sometimes still, of showing my warts and all that stuff. But when I'm probably sober probably 60 days, and I'm in this meeting this time around. So I've been back in I was sober from 1984 to 2002, and I went back to the rooms in 2004. So I've been back in the rooms since 2004. So I've been back in the rooms about 21 years. Um, One thing, sobriety is so rich now. Sobriety is so rich when you work the steps and you become involved and it becomes part of who you are. And you don't be afraid of the fourth step. If you work the fourth and fifth step, you're not afraid of the fear inventory, of the sex inventory. You not do that. But I'm in this meeting, and this guy is sitting, and he has his phone, and his a text came in, and he says, "Oh, that was for my wife," and he was sharing a phone with his wife, and he said, well, why did you do that? And he says, well, I have nothing to share, nothing to hide. And I thought, well, that's a really bad effing idea, because if you were anything like me, I had different worlds and I didn't want my worlds to collide. I wanted I wanted to keep these secrets and keep them over here. That when the worlds collided, 21 years later, I don't have to do that. I have changed. I have become different. I don't do that anymore. Those parts that just doesn't happen anymore. Um, that was one of the things, and the other, and it was really important but that same guy that I talked about his phones, he looked at me and he said, Rob, if you stay sober, your message can help other alcoholics. And I loved that. And it was one of the first times when someone gave me a message of hope and that my experience can benefit others. Because I was so full of, when I came here, because I was in the South, when I came around, they said, you were pitiful. I was just pitiful. I was, I couldn't look above my shoes. Um, I had my head down all the time. But when someone gave me the hope that my experience can benefit others, that opened things up. And since your experience can experience benefit others, it becomes um, it becomes less selfish, and the world becomes bigger. Everything becomes bigger and uh, less focused in about myself. I do have to admit, this is really what's when I really want to talk about this more than anything like that, is I am capable in recovery of being kind and gentle and loving and understanding. I'm also capable in recovery of being selfish, self centered, and egotistical. I can, in recovery, long time sobriety, I can still revert back to behaviors that I go, well, I didn't think I see that guy again. Where was he at? But he shows up. That shows up. When I wake up in my morning, my computer resets to self. When I boot up, it reboots to self. That is my when I reboot in the morning. So because I reboot to self in the morning, how do I not reboot to self? And that's what I need you for. That's what I need you for. That's what we need a higher power for. That's why we have to do that, is so I don't revert back to self. And it's so easy. I love talking about me. And then after I love talking about me, I want to know what you think about me. I mean, it is the circle. I wish I was the sun and everyone would rotate and do what I asked. Um, and that is one thing I love is I see a lot of drunks nodding. You go, well, yeah, of course. That is how it's supposed to be. If I was the center, you guys wouldn't have that. It wouldn't be so effed up if you guys just do what I said. There is no question that is how we do this. But remember what I talked about in the beginning and about my favorite quote is our inability to form a true partnership. How do I form a true partnership? By sharing, by being open, by talking. On one hand, on the other hand, I have been at meetings with newly sober people, and because they're so full of guilt and shame, they want to share everything at the meeting. And remember, we have those sayings that people have of, oh, take the cotton out of your ears and put them in your mouth, and stuff like that. Well, there is some self preservation in that. And when people do that, I want them to get a sponsor because I did that. I was guilty of oversharing in a meeting and saying stuff that, where it was meant to be shared? Fourth step, fifth step with the sponsor. It was not meant to be shared with a whole group of strangers who may or may not be sober, may or may not stay sober, may or may not be able to maintain our most important thing, which is our anonymity. I think that's why we go to sponsors. And that's why sometimes when I hear people overshare, I want to say, you don't have to say that here. You can say that with the sponsor. I'm not going to say, I'm not being the judgment police, but I am going to say what we used to say about taking the cotton out of your ears and putting it in your mouth. I used to think that was mean. And now I think it's really helpful. It was really helpful. So people, and not only helpful, but helps people, directs them to get a sponsor and to work the steps with the sponsor. Because I've tried to do this on my own, and left to my own devices, all I do is get drunk. I get drunk. No. On the other hand, and also I've been to treatment. No, one of the things is I've been hospitalized 3 times for alcoholism. I've never been arrested, but I've been in the hospital 3 times, and I have kind of fancy diagnoses. I am a cross-addicted alcoholic, and I'm also a poly-addicted alcoholic. But I won't say that because that sounds so sissified. I don't want to be poly anything. I want to be a macho alcoholic in a tough guy alcoholic instead of poly-addicted. I didn't want that. I want to be a tough guy. So now, but the bottom line is, if I have a drink of alcoholic, If I have a drink of alcohol, the only thing I can guarantee you is I will have a second drink. That is what happens. That's a definition of what alcoholism is. Is we cannot predict what we're going to do. So why do we work these steps? Why do we do these steps? Why do we talk about sex and fear and resentments? And the reason we talk about sex and fear and resentments is because it helps us join with humanity. It helps us join with other people in our life. It helps us uh, be able to walk with each other. So I got two inappropriate jokes. So if you're trouble with them, tough. Anyhow, there's a guy, a lady in a nursing home, a man in the nursing home, and he's in the nursing home, and in this, it's like an apartment complex nursing home, and the lady is walking outside, and she's selling super sex. She said super sex. Super sex, and she's going in the hallway saying super sex, and she knocks on this old guy's doorway, and she says, super sex, and he'll say, I'll have the soup. And so and that's one of the that's thing about age. As we get old enough, I'll take the soup. And the other one is an alcoholic joke about the sex inventory, and the alcoholic joke is about the sex inventory. And I won't go through the whole joke because it is dirty, but the bottom line is the punchline is, did your chicken die? And so what we did, that is, I can't do, I won't do it because it's long. But anyhow, what we learn here is that we do a fifth step, we can get rid of that. We do a fifth step and we get rid of that stuff and we don't have to carry it along. And then we kept that. My sponsor, I got 3 minutes. My sponsor, after I did these inventories and I had this piece of paper, he had me get a 3x5 note cards with all the resentments written down. So I went down the 3x5. I had 3x5 cards wrapped in a rubber band, is about an inch thick, and I had them in the glove compartment in my car. And I had them with me until I saw people where I could not have them anymore. And I don't have any more resentment cards. And I want to say what's really wonderful is that I was amazed at the grace and gratitude of other human beings, of how kind people were and how gracious they were when I did my amends. Not all of them. And one amends I made, she wanted me to do something that I don't think was anatomically possible. It's dark and I don't bend that way. I'm not that flexible, and wanted me to die afterwards. And you know what? I earned that. I earned that disdain. She didn't have to forgive me, nor did she want to. But what I learned from that is I don't want to be that guy again because I was wrong. I treated another human being in a painful, hurtful, manipulative, bad way. And I earned every bit of her disdain and dislike and wish I'd put my head up my ass. That was, and I earned that. And and now I don't have to be that guy anymore. So I almost wish that all eighth and ninth step, you have one that goes bad because it's learning. It is a lesson about, you know, people's graciousness kind of gives you a free pass. And when they're not gracious, it's okay for not having people being gracious all the time. Thank you. I appreciate your time.